Good morning. Today on the Closers Inner Circle podcast, we are digging into the concept of sales infiltration, what it really is, how it differs from traditional sales approaches, and why my co-host Ben Gay III has called it unequivocally the best sales work he has ever written. I've heard him say that many times before. I have read this book, The Closers Part 2, multiple times over the years, and I agree with him. We're also going to explore the mindset of the master closer. The question is, what separates top performers from typical salespeople? And this is important, write this down, how understanding human behavior plays a critical role in effective infiltration and whether this skill can be learned. And yes, it can, just in case you're asking or wondering, or if it's something that is only innate to the best in the business, it can be taught, but you have to get focused about it. So Ben has, like I said, he has called this the best sales work he's ever written. And after decades of experience, countless deals, and a lifetime in the art and science of selling, it truly stands above the rest. And this is a very important conversation for anyone serious about sales. And let's face it, we're all in sales. It doesn't matter if we're standing behind a cash register in a Dollar Tree. You're selling something. You're selling your personality. You're selling kindness. You're selling empathy. You're selling something. We're all selling. Just, you know, think about your resume. Think about getting engaged. You just sold some schmuck into marrying you. That was sales infiltration. So, ask me what I think about marriage. No, don't ask me. So to get the most out of this, we encourage you to follow along with the Closers books, parts 1 and 2, and they are available on eBay at Ronzoni Books, Ronzone, and they are signed and dated by Ben himself. And let's get to our sponsor, who is me. This episode is brought to you by your partner in Success Radio, and we are ranked in the top, me and Ben, because he's part of your partner in Success Radio. We are ranked in the top 1.5% of podcasts worldwide, and we are heard around the globe 3 times a week. So if you want your message in front of the right audience, our preferred partner program is really the way to do it. It's very affordable and it is very effective. You give us 3 to 4 key points, books, service events, whatever you need to share with the audience. And we share them in my voice, which is, as I mentioned, heard worldwide, guiding listeners exactly where you want them to go. So if you're interested to get started and secure your spot, head on over to your partner in successradio.com and go to the Partner with Us tab, and let's make sure that your expertise gets heard where it counts. Ben, it's your turn to talk.
Hi.
I'm already tired. So, I'm worn plumb out.
I haven't heard that term in a long time. Plumb.
Yeah.
I'm,
Eh,
I'm
you know,
plumb tired. I'm plumb
yeah,
done with that. Yeah.
yeah. I was thinking about my grandma the other day, and she wasn't Southern, but she was a country woman. Yeah, she was a farmer's wife, and she had phrases that they'll just pop into my head every now and then. I'm like, "Hi, Grandma." She's been gone a long time, but I'm waving at the clouds. But hey, thanks for stopping by.
Senator Kennedy from Louisiana.
Love that guy.
Yeah, he pops up on television, as you know, frequently. And I get the biggest kick out of him because he takes me back to the South, just hearing
Hmm.
him talk. And Gigi will crack up, laugh, and say, he's so witty. I said, no, he's got a good memory. I've heard that 50 times before him. And he does have some original stuff, but mainly it's a walk down an old country road in the South.
It is, and he's a very intelligent man.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he's in high IQ area. I like him. I think he's just hysterical, but I've never known him to be just dead wrong.
No, I haven't either. He has common sense, which he talks about a lot. He has common sense, something good salespeople should have. Common sense. It's not the new shiny object. You don't have to outwit everybody, just common sense. And when you display common sense, other people relate to it. They go, yeah, I might not have thought to say that, but that's right. And that type of breakthrough sprinkled through a sales conversation is dynamite.
It really is. And common sense, as we all know, is just not that common. And I think it's becoming a bit more rare than it should be. But, I eat, sleep, drink HTML. I code in my sleep. I'm a nerd. But I had to learn a long time ago to tone it down. Nobody wants to know what a GUI, graphical user interface is. They just they're using it all the time. They just don't know it and they don't care. So,
Right. And
that talking
confused
about that
minds,
was yeah, I
I'm
know what you're
sorry,
gonna say. Go ahead.
confused minds don't buy, is all I was going to say. And when you start talking to me in acronyms and high tech stuff, I'm gone. I may be looking at you, acting, nodding occasionally, but I'm thinking about what am I going to do when I get home? What I'm going to have for dinner? What's my next phone call? Because I tune out. I don't know it, and I don't want to know it.
Right.
My old Charlie Smith story when Apollo 14 took off, and he was sitting right in front of me in the VIP stands, and Dan Rather or somebody said to him, Mr. Smith, and keep in mind, he was, I think, 111 or something, is the best they could figure, brought to this country, chained in the hold of a sailing ship and sold on the docks at Charleston, South Carolina. And they said they're going to go up to the moon, and there's this huge Saturn V-B rocket sitting there. And they're going to go to the moon. They're going to get moon rocks, and they're going to bring them back with them. What do you think about that? And he said, if they come back with moon rocks, it's because they took moon rocks with them. Charlie Smith had all the new information he wanted, electricity, and fill in the blank. Anything you can think of had been invented in his lifetime.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and he'd had enough. And I frequently, I'll ask Gigi to do something on the computer. I had one yesterday, and she said, "Well, let me show you how I did that." And I said, "No, that's all right. Charlie Smith and I are done. Just do it."
And I'm glad you brought up the astronauts because and I haven't checked in to see if they've started that travel up to the moon today yet, but today's
No,
supposed to be a slingshot around the moon after 54 years, which I don't understand at all.
50 some odd years since Apollo 17 left there. There's only, I knew them all as an attitude coach for Apollo 15,
And
16, 17.
that's where I
Met
wanted you to go because I wanted to hear you talk about stories from them.
great people, and a couple of jerks here and there, but that was because they were fighter pilots, most of them, first. It was before they all became doctors and researched this and researched that. The earlier crowds of astronauts were fighter pilots, test pilots. They were the go-go folks.
Like Chuck
And
Yeager, wasn't he one?
yeah, no, he wasn't. He
He
should have been.
wasn't? Oh,
No, he wasn't appointed to the astronaut. He was a friend of mine because we owned the B-29 bomber that dropped his rocket plane at the X-1, I think it was called, dropped it from its belly, which enabled him to break the sound barrier for the first time. So when he found out we had that particular B-29, the Fertile Myrtle, he called one day and said, "You may not know me, but my name is Chuck Yeager." And I said, "Yeah, I think I've heard of you."
I think we've
And
all heard of him.
yeah, and he said, and he lived right up the road in Grass Valley at the time. He's passed now, but he said, "I understand you have my plane." And I said, I'd heard rumors of that, but I didn't know it for a fact. I said, "You talking about the Fertile Myrtle?" He said, "Yep, that was the mother bird that dropped me and enabled me to break the sound barrier." And I said, "It's right over at the American Air Museum in Oakland. You come down here, I'll take you over there and we'll see it." Then he discovered somewhere on that trip, I forget what it was, at our airport or at the Oakland airport, he saw our P-51, which he always maintained was the best airplane ever built. And he said, "Will you take me up in that?" And I said, "Will I take you up in that? You don't want that." I said, "But you can take me up in it if you'd like." And he said, "Well, let me get in there and feel around," and so on. About a half an hour later, we were flying the P-51. and I was in the jump seat where the radios used to go. It's a single-seat airplane, but we made it a two-seater by taking out some equipment and putting in a little stool, basically, a jump seat behind it. And he didn't do anything terribly fancy. I think he was a little out of practice himself, but he
He
said that.
probably didn't want to have to haul a dead body back down to the ground.
Yeah. And speaking of dead bodies, that was the plane that William Penn Patrick, the owner of Holiday Magic Cosmetics, my boss and one of my earliest mentors, was killed in. He and
Oh, I didn't know that. I mean, I
yeah,
knew he had been killed in a plane. I didn't know it was Chuck Yeager's plane.
well, it was our plane that Chuck Yeager flew, but it was
Right,
his favorite plane.
right.
But Chuck fortunately didn't. I was sitting in the same seat that the head of our Norway, Sweden, Denmark operations was sitting in when he was killed. When the plane went in, I was called and, was it a suicide? Because Bill had financial and legal problems. I left the company a year or so before, and suicide crossed my mind. And then they said, I forget the man's name. I'm embarrassed by that, but the head of our Norway, Sweden, Denmark operation was in the jump seat. And I said, no,
No,
Bill didn't commit suicide. And they said, how
that
do
was
you know?
somebody in the plane.
Yeah. I said, on his worst day, and we had our own legal battles, but I stuck up for him. I said, on his worst day, he wouldn't have taken anybody with him. The reason he died was he was reckless, would be one word to phrase it. If he was a level 7 pilot, he flew at a level 9. And the last time we flew together was in the P-51. We went from the airport in Santa Fe, where we had our Cessna dealership. We went up to the ranch, and when it was time to go, my wife at the time, Marcia, who's passed away now, was in the Powder Puff Derby that weekend, flying with a friend of hers across the country. So I went up there just to be with somebody. And when it came time to go, he said, well, I'll fly you down whenever you're ready. I said, no, I've already called Art Stagg. He was our corporate pilot. He's coming to get me. He said, we have 3 airplanes sitting here, including the one we came up in, the P-51. And I said, Bill, I have flown with you for the last time, uh, with you as the pilot and, me as the passenger. You cannot fly around upside down in these mountains at 400 miles an hour without eventually hitting something. And I've got a young son to raise and a wife. So Art Stagg is coming to get me. And he did, and Bill was quite upset about that. Well, you don't trust me. I said, I trust you. I don't trust your flying abilities. So Art came and got me, and that was the last time I ever got in a plane with Bill Patrick. And that was the plane he was in when they called me and told me he was dead, and did I think it was a suicide. So interesting times, to say the least. But Chuck Yeager, that's how I met Chuck. And the reason there may be reasons I don't know, but the reason Chuck Yeager was never made an astronaut was the same reason John Glenn was never sent to the moon. They had become so popular and sort of the logos of aviation and the space industry that no president wanted to be the one that got John Glenn killed.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely understand. And I was thinking that right as you were saying that, I was going through my mind, like, that's a PR that you cannot get over. That's a
Right.
PR crisis that no crisis management is going to get you out of.
And Chuck Yeager may be a trivia question to today's generations, but he was a man's man and one of the best pilots that ever lived. Uh, and just a stand-up guy. Every time I was around him, I was really impressed. And a friend of mine, by coincidence, as Chuck got older, I don't think he was poverty-stricken. He had his pensions and so on. But he never had big money days, and what money days he had were over. A friend of mine, by coincidence, I was talking to him one day, and Uh, he said, I was mowing a yard of a friend of yours the other day. And I said, in Grass Valley? He said, Chuck Yeager. And he said, I've been mowing his yard for a year or so. I noticed it was overgrown one day. And then I heard was not in great health. So he said, I just took it upon myself. And apparently Yeager put up with it. That's not his nature to be helped by other people. But hanging around those guys was really interesting. You ask about the astronauts, Jim Irwin, my favorite of all the astronauts. And there are only 4 left who ever walked on the moon. There were only 12, and 8 are dead.
I
Uh,
know.
but Jim Irwin was my favorite. He drove the lunar buggy on Apollo 15, and just a down to earth guy. And after he left the astronaut corps, he set up Operation High Flight. It was a religious organization, and just a wonderful, wonderful man. I asked him when he was describing coming around the moon when they took off. You circle the moon once, I guess it was, and slingshot yourself back to Earth. I said, when you came around and saw sort of a version of that Earthrise picture we've all seen.
Yeah, that is stunning. I mean, and that's a true picture. That's not made up.
Oh no, yeah, that's real. And almost every crew took their version of the same
Mm.
shot. So there's more than one floating around. But I had one in my office for years. The original one taken by, I forget whom, but taken by one of them, Buzz Aldrin, maybe. Anyway, I said, you came around the back of the moon and there was the Earth, and you're looking down on the Earth. What what crossed your mind? And I thought he was going to say something like, I've achieved it all, or I've climbed the mountain, or whatever. And he said, I was struck by my total insignificance. And I
I
thought, man,
remember you telling me that.
yeah, what a humble thing to say. And now with a new telescope that goes way beyond the Hubble, we're looking out, and I'm thinking, we're not even insignificant. That would be a step up. There are billions of solar systems with the sun and planets circling, and billions of galaxies and so on, numbers I can't even begin to comprehend.
And I think they keep finding more.
Oh, yeah, they are. And they're like the light they see left its source over 1 billion years ago,
What?
traveling at 386,000 miles a second. It
Holy
left,
cow.
you know, that's I don't even like thinking about it because it just shrivels you down to nothing, you know.
Yeah, we really are nothing in the bigger scheme. I
Does
wanted
it?
to ask you, did you ever meet astronaut Alan Bean,
I believe I did.
Apollo 12? I was
Well, I
poking
met
around.
all the Apollo guys.
Yeah, so you undoubtedly knew him, but here's a plot twist. America's number one song, Sugar Sugar by the Archies, which is a completely fictional cartoon band, was on that flight. He said that Alan Bean said that it was one of the songs on his tape deck, and the Apollo 12 crew jammed to it on their way to the moon. So who knew sugar highs could go intergalactic? Now we know. So that's my last bit of my knowledge for the day. And back to Chuck Yeager, he broke the sound barrier, didn't he?
He's the first one to ever
That's what
break
I
it.
thought. Okay.
That the X-1 plane was partially inside our B-29 when it took off. You couldn't put enough fuel on the rocket plane to have it take off and go break the sound barrier. You had to get it up to, I don't know, 20, 30,000 feet and then drop it from something, not unlike what the space shuttle was doing, how it uh, got transported around in those days. And so Chuck got in, he was in the B-29, lowered himself down into the cockpit of the rocket plane, shut the uh, hatch, and unbeknownst to anyone except maybe his wife, he had broken his arm and they wouldn't have let him fly if they'd known that. He'd broken his arm a couple of days before. So he splinted it up and used it sparingly, but he had to lower the hatch and so on. So he flew with a broken arm. And Pancho, who ran a bar out there in the desert, I forget what her last name was, but Pancho knew about it. And he swore, she said, "What's wrong with you?" Apparently, in a conversation a day or two before, "What's wrong with you?" And he said, "Just between you and me, can't tell anybody else." And Pancho agreed to that. He said, "I broke my arm." And she said, "You're not going to fly." And he said, "Pancho, we have our we have our agreement."
You
So he
can't
not
tell anybody.
yeah, do not tell anybody. And so then he was dropped out of the belly of the B-29 at altitude and pretty good speed, probably, I don't know, 200 or 300 miles an hour, or whatever it could do. And with that boost, that's how come the sound barrier could be broken.
He sales infiltrated his way into that, didn't he?
He did what?
He used sales infiltration to get where he wanted
Yeah,
to go.
yeah, yeah. That and
We're supposed to be talking about sales infiltration, but today is an important day. So, and I
yeah,
love your stories about the astronauts, but I keep going back to they didn't let them stop. They just infiltrated their way wherever they wanted to go.
yeah. That's how I met them. I infiltrated my way into the family of Jim and Jeannie Harrington. He was the launch test supervisor of the manned space program. She was a holiday girl for Holiday Magic Cosmetics. And through that friendship, I met her husband. And by meeting her husband, I became buddies of theirs and got invited to a gathering of Apollo, the astronauts, and many of the ground crew of Apollo 15, 16, and 17. It was at their house in a sit on the floor conversation where Jim Irwin asked me to be the astronaut, the attitude coach for the astronauts of those three crews that were there, because their concern was, what do we do after we're astronauts? They weren't trained for sales or business.
No, and high adrenaline people. I mean,
Right.
getting a job in a cubby was not going to work.
No, a office cubicle would not have worked for those folks.
No, I can see them just going to heck with this and blowing it up as they walk out into the desert. I mean, and how did you help? You got to tell me, what were some of the things that they were really concerned about without giving away anything that you shouldn't be giving
It
away?
was nothing that you would think of. They weren't
Really?
afraid to fly. They weren't afraid of being blown up. They weren't afraid of this or that. And they dispelled a lot of the myths and stories around them. But they said, but we're creating new ones as we speak. In other words, they understood the game. Danny Cox, an old friend of mine, was a fighter pilot, test pilot, and he was the sonic boom salesman, meaning he was sent around to communities all over the United States where we flew supersonic planes over people's houses and broke out their windows from time to time. And it was his job to go tell the neighborhoods before, after, and during. He was talking to a group one day when it happened and broke a window of the room he was in. Tell them why sonic booms were good and they protected their families and so on. So he was he was a salesman later anyway, but he was a great salesman selling that product. And they knew, and I'll tell you a story of two sales that I missed. Thank God. I was hanging around with that crowd. I saw the first mock up of the space shuttle. It was in the vehicle assembly building, covered with things. It was not generally, hadn't been generally seen by anybody. And I think it was a 3/4 size, but I may be wrong. But anyway, they took me in there and let me see it. So the it became known early in the shuttle program that they wanted to send somebody up. I had recommended it to them, but I'm not claiming it was my idea, who could come back and talk about it and sell the people on selling their Congress people, senators, congressmen, on more money for the space program because it's always been underfunded. If you agree with it at all and want it done, it's always been underfunded.
Is that
So
why it's been 50 years or more? I mean,
money,
I've
yeah,
never understood that.
money.
Oh, that works. Okay.
You know.
Keep going.
So they thought it might be a good idea once the shuttle started flying, because no one person had to fly the shuttle. There was a captain and a co-captain and whatever people trained to fly, and others were passengers doing scientific things and so on. So they thought it might be a good idea to send somebody up who was a civilian who could come back and talk about it and help sell other people on the concept. So I said, don't have to be a pilot. They're not asking about education or anything. They just want somebody who can talk. That's what I do for a living. And so I decided, and Danny Cox was a test pilot, a fighter pilot, etc. And he can speak. That's really what he did. Most of his life was teach sales training. I said, Danny, why don't I put in a little effort and see if we can't get one of us, I was thinking both of us, on the shuttle and be the civilian they send up? He said, I'm in, do it. Well, he was really excited about it. That was more up his alley. So I pushed pretty hard on him and half-heartedly on me. I'm not sure why. I guess I just figured the odds. But I was
You're
in with the right.
probably you're probably worried about getting car sick.
Yeah, yeah. I flew on the Vomit Comet,
Oh, oh yeah.
26 weightless spots, basically the length of Florida. And the astronauts, being good people, told me to eat a big meal because we weren't going to get a chance to eat that day. And in the kitchen that morning, I said to Jeannie Harrington, I was staying at their house, Jeannie, I'm supposed to eat a big meal. She turned around and said, no, you're not. I said, but Jim Irwin said, I don't care what he said, you're not eating a big meal
Yeah,
here or anywhere else.
let's play with the newbie.
Exactly. So I made, I like to count it as two sales presentations, one to get Danny Cox on the shuttle and two to get me on the shuttle, and then come back and be a spokesperson for the NASA program. Well, unfortunately for them, fortunately for Danny and me, that was the Challenger.
I knew it.
Yeah.
I actually wrote that down
Yeah.
because I was going to ask if it was the Challenger.
So when I was doing a sales meeting in my office with a bunch of people, and I always have the news on, I had on a television on the credenza behind me, and somebody said, I think that thing just blew up. And I said, no, when you go up, you have to drop the rockets. And I was talking like it was a three-stage rocket, where the first stage falls off, second stage. That didn't happen with the space shuttle, although the booster engines fell off. So I'm giving an explanation of something I'm not looking at to explain it to these dummies that they don't know rocket separation. And Johnny Hyde, one of my friends and top salespeople, was there, and he said, Ben, you better turn around and look at this. And I turned around, and it was obviously a serious malfunction. And just as I turned around, the guy from NASA was picked up on television as saying, we've had a malfunction.
Oh,
And
that's an understatement, isn't it?
yeah, so I had little chance of getting on it, but I was pushing, and Danny Cox, I was pushing hard. And he told me one time before he passed, he said, Ben, I'm glad you were not a good salesman. I said, I am a good salesman. He said, if you were a good salesman, I'd have been on the Challenger.
True. Wasn't that was the one that the school teacher, Krista McCullough, I think.
Yeah,
McCullough.
yeah.
I think
She
that
had
just broke the nation's hearts.
that spot.
Yeah, she did.
So whoever sold them on her did a better sales job than I did, and that's the reason you and I are talking today. And that is uh, sales infiltration and or lack of it, but it's a great example of sales infiltration, how I got in close with that crowd. I became the attitude coach for the astronauts because I was good at sales infiltration, because I made friends with and stayed at the home of the launch test supervisor of the manned space program, Jim Harrington. Um, I got close enough with Dr. Davis and Miles Ross, the two heads of NASA, through sales infiltration to be in a position to have the right to campaign to get on the shuttle. I just wasn't a good enough sales infiltrator. Thank you.
And I'm glad
Earlier,
you weren't, to be honest. I never thought I'd say that to you, but I'm glad you failed in this one.
yeah, me too. I'll have to admit, me too. The You said earlier you were talking about top performers. Does it just happen, or can it be trained? The answer is there are people who do things naturally. Jimmy Rucker, my running buddy, top best salesman I ever personally worked with, was a natural sales infiltrator. I was thinking of him when I wrote Sales Infiltration. It was dedicated, not literally, but it was in my mind dedicated to Jimmy Rucker and a few other wonderful people I've known along the way who were just good. When I was a YMCA swimming instructor, I discovered that you could teach almost anybody how to swim unless they had tremendous fear of the water and such body density that they sank like a stone. There
I
were
sink
people,
and I'm terrified of water.
yeah, well,
Terrified.
you
I was
probably
thrown
wouldn't have been
into
a good one.
No, I was thrown into the pool when I was very young and then promptly forgotten. My mother found me at the bottom of the pool.
Oh,
So I don't swim.
experience.
No,
Uh,
doesn't.
but so there are those most people you can teach to swim. Most people you can teach how to sell. There are some who do it naturally. They don't know anything else. It's just who they are. I was a trainable. I had a good personality. I was voted wittiest that and funniest in this and so on. So, but I wasn't a trained salesperson. I had to learn that. Part of it was watching my father and his friends, but even that wasn't a class. It wasn't say this, do this, open with this, and so on. I had to be trained. Jimmy Rucker was born selling. He came out of his mother smiling, laughing, joking, and
Kind of like
everybody,
Zig Ziglar.
yeah, everybody loved Jimmy Rucker. And he, which made him the worst sales trainer on earth. I'd mentioned this before. I put him up in the front of the room until I learned better. Jimmy, come up here, because I secretly knew that in our partnership, he was a better salesperson than I was. I was good. He was great. So I say, Jimmy, come up here and tell him how we do it. And he'd get up and he'd say, wander to the front of the room. And that was one of his other little charming things. He didn't walk to the front of the room. He wandered to the front of the room, probably with his hands in his pocket. And he said, well, just do what I do. Watch me and do what I do. And he'd go back to his chair.
He learned you, huh? You couldn't sales infiltrate him. He just wasn't having it.
No, but he was one, but it was unnatural. But your question was, or you're quoting someone, can top performers be trained? Yes. So don't use, well, so and so is a natural as an excuse, because they may be. Uh, Back to YMCA swim instruction. You lined up the kids on the edge of the pool and said, all right, we're going to go swimming here. Splash. And somebody would just dove in the pool and swam to the other side. Like, where's the rest of you? And then somebody else would do it, and so on. There were people who could A, float, B, weren't afraid of the water, and I guess had seen enough other people swim where they sort of replicated what they saw. There were others who I literally gave up on, not defeated. It was no point. They sunk like a stone. They were terrified of the water. My job wasn't to terrify them. So I took them to the shallow end and got them used to at least wading around in the water, maybe put their face in the water while
No,
they
no, no, no. You don't do that. No, I still don't do that. In fact,
put
for
a tough
years,
case.
I would put a washcloth over my face in the shower because I didn't want water touching my face. I mean, I was really freaked out as a kid.
As Reagan said to some protester one day at a speech, we'll put you down as doubtful. Probably you wouldn't have been at the awards dinner. So there are those. And there are people who can't sell. People, sales trying to say everybody can sell. No, they can't. There's some people who are so terrified of other people, so fearful of rejection, uh, fear of the unknown, etc. You just really can't. You could get them to be order takers, stand behind a counter and hand them what they ask for. Even that would be terrifying for them. But you're not going to make them master closers. You're not going to make them sales infiltrators. But there's three groups oversimplified. There's the group who are naturals, Jimmy Rucker. There are the group that is trainable, the Ben Gays of the world. And there are people that I've said to them quietly without embarrassing them, this isn't for you. No amount of training is going to save you. Jim Rohn
And
used
go
Jim
ahead.
Rohn used to say to seminar attendees, how many of you have been to a seminar before? Hands go up. How many have been to 2 seminars? Hands go up. How many have been to 3 seminars? Hands go up. He said, what are you doing here? What, what are
You've
you
already
not?
learned this.
Yeah. I'm
Yeah,
gonna tell you everybody else what I've told you before and what everybody else has told you. But there are people who just don't take action, can't swim, can't sell. Fortunately, for the rest of us, that's a minority. Most can be trained, and some are naturals.
I agree with you. And I've got a new word I'm going to throw at you because while we're talking about things that people are just terrified of, for me, it's swimming. It really is. And, for some people, like, I can't sell, and they've convinced themselves they're not going to try it. They ain't going to do it, as we say in the South. Ain't happening, hon. But then the other big thing that people are genuinely afraid of, I think it's over 75% of people suffer from what's called glossophobia, which is basically fear of speaking out, in public.
What's the word?
Glossophobia, Glossophobia.
I've talked about it for years and never
Me
knew it
too.
had a name.
So I had to share it. I got this word. It's like, here you go. It's all
All right.
yours. But
You've you've doubled my education in one sentence.
telling you, and people say, "Well, I want to be a podcaster, but I'm afraid of what?" Yeah, I don't get that. But if you really have some kind of block that says, "Oh, I can't do that," then don't. Find
Well,
another way to get your voice heard. Nobody should force you in front of a microphone.
you just remind me of something. Dean Garrison is a schoolmate of Gigi's, lives in Thailand, and he's a child psychologist and a marriage counselor. Great guy. And I was talking to him one day, and we were talking about marriage counseling. And he said, "Well, you and Gigi will never hire me." And I said, "She might, but you're right. I won't. I'm happy." And I said, how do you deal with that? And he said, well, the first thing I do, he said, as a salesperson, you'll appreciate this. I, I, I ask the question nobody wants to ask. Nancy, do you love Bob? Are you in love with Bob? She answers, Bob, are you in love with Nancy? She answers. He said, if either one of them says no, I stand up, say, I don't want to waste your time or money, shake their hand and let them go.
Hmm.
There's no point in me spending dozens of hours or hundreds of
Right.
hours and their money trying to accomplish what can't be accomplished. You
I
don't love
agree.
them, end of story. Go find someone you love or live alone. There's a significant difference between being alone and lonely.
There is. And I will be alone for the rest of my days, except for my cats and my dog. But I've been married, hated it, done my time. I'm never doing it again. The loneliest I ever
Done my
was.
time.
Done my time. The loneliest I've ever been was when I was married. I was wretched.
Yeah.
So
Well,
not, as we say in the South, ain't doing that again. So I'm done. I'd rather be hit by a beer truck, to be honest.
you said you've done your time. It reminds me of a time I heard that at Lompoc, the federal prison, a guy was coming out, leaving, and there was another guy sitting there he had one of those sad cases. He had had a minor infraction. I mean, minor, but he got convicted of something. And then through parole violations, he stretched I'm making up numbers, but as best I recall, a 4 or 5 year sentence to where when I met him, he was in his 20th year.
Ooh, ow.
One crime, I mean, the source crime, and the rest of them were parole violations. So he had been through the ringer. He'd been in maximum security, minimum security, medium security, etc. And this guy is leaving. I don't know if they knew each other or not, but it was obvious he was leaving. Had his little roll under his arm, every belonging he had under his right arm. And there was a car waiting for him. It had all the looks of I'm going home. And he turned to this guy as he was getting in the car, and he said, "Well, it's been nice knowing you," sort of a sarcastic farewell. He said, "My man, let me tell you something. You will be alone again, but you'll never be lonely." And I thought, whoa, that's profound, because in prison, you may be in with hundreds of people, thousands of people. When I worked at San Quentin, again, from memory, I think it was 3,200 people. You were not short of people around you, within sight of you, some within touch of you, but you were doing your own time. You were alone. And that's not the time to become lonely, especially if you're looking at a 15-year sentence or a 30-year sentence or life without possibility of parole. So what he said was really profound. You'll be alone again, but you'll never be lonely. And he meant you've been inoculated for that by going through this experience. I've thought about it many times, and it's been helpful to me because I really enjoy alone time, thinking.
Yeah, me too.
And Gigi and I can be alone together, lying in bed reading a book. I enjoy having her presence there, but we don't need to be chattering all the time. And so we're together and alone simultaneously, frequently. So that's among the things that you can learn and benefit from. And if you're listening to this and you're a salesperson, here's another thing I suggest you do. Take notes with things like that. Uh, Short stories that have a profound lesson within them. One of the great things I learned one day while reading a book of quotes by Winston Churchill, and they were, never give up, never, never, never give up, never, and all the things we will fight them in the hedgerows, we'll fight them on the beaches, and all the things Churchill was famous for. But the one that jumped out at me, oddly enough, from a book of quotes, Churchill said, "The uneducated man," when I write that in something, I always say person now because times have changed, but he said, "The uneducated man should read books of quotes." And the other day, while cleaning out a bookcase, Judy has told me that I'm at my limit again, uh, based on the shelves that are taken up. We think we're at about 5,000 again, so we're thinning them down. But the one thing I haven't thrown out is any book of quotes, anecdotes, inspirational uh, speeches, whatever those stay, because Churchill said the uneducated man, and that's me as far as formal education goes, should read books of quotes. Because what the quote does is it takes a whole, there may be 4 or 5 of them in a book, but rarely more than that. It takes the whole book and boils it down to its essence.
It
Yeah,
does. It distills it down to something that's memorable
right.
and you're not
Yeah,
going to
and
forget.
memorable. Yeah,
Right.
and memorable. That's a key thing. So I have quotes locked away in my head that I haven't thought of in years, but I know from experience in the right situation when something is said, it comes back fresh as ever because it fits that situation. And if you're going to be a sales infiltrator, a master closer, one of the things you need to do is be a good storyteller. And good stories come to light through quotes and observations. Doesn't have to be a famous quote. It can be something you made up based on something you saw. My favorite example, Jimmy Carter. I'm from Georgia. I understand Jimmy Carter. Good man, uh, horrible president.
Yeah, he was, but he did a lot of good after he got out of.
After
Yeah,
great former president.
I agree.
It's a shame we had to go through that to make him a former president. But anyway, I got his memoirs. I forget what it was called, Peanuts or something. And
Boiled peanuts.
yeah,
I hate those, by the way. They're nasty.
me too. Uh, so anyway, I read his book, and it was all I could do to get through it. It was just uh, air. It was like cotton candy without the flavor. It was just nothing there. But in the middle of it, somewhere, I read him say, I was sitting in the Plains Baptist Church one day, Plains, Georgia, when the minister said, if you were arrested today and charged with being a Christian, would there be enough evidence to convict you?
You know, you've told me that before, and I wrote it down.
Yeah, it's so powerful and so true, and it was worth wading through that entire book to get it. And you can find them on Amazon. Right here within reach of me is a book, 14,000 quips and quotes for writers and speakers. Next to it is the great thoughts. Next to that is the leadership changers. And then I have the Living Bible. With If you open that up, it's filled with phrases and chapters and so on that have been underlined. Uh, Peter's quotations, Lawrence J. Peter, great guy, gone now, but Peter's quotations, whole book by him. And then over in a bookcase, see, Words of Wisdom by Leonard Safer. I have my hand right now on top of 10 quote books. They're always nearby when I'm writing, thinking, doing it, ghostwriting, whatever. And then about 10 feet away is a whole bookcase full of things I'm not willing to give up because they all have quotes somewhere in the title.
Right. Two
I
of my
can get,
favorites are the Stoics, obviously, Marcus
yes,
Aurelius, and of course C.S. Lewis.
yes, yes. So, if you just sat down with a highlighter pen and depending on what you're up to, if you're a salesperson, do those. If you're a budding guru, write down the inspirational quotes and so on. You can give yourself in 30 days the equivalency of a college education. Now, if you're going to be a heart surgeon, I hope if you're going to be mine,
I go
that
to school.
you go to school.
Yeah, I show up.
Yeah, a book of quotes won't save us there. But repeat, Churchill, the uneducated man should read books of quotes. I say one of the things in being a great sales infiltrator, master closer, is become a person of class, quality, and substance. You've heard that before from me. One of the quickest way to get there is books of quotes. And then a conversation I was having with somebody uh, earlier this week or last week sometime, um, he said, "Tell me about your not getting close to your heroes." And I had to think for a split second, but it reminded me what he was referring to was Bill Patrick, William Penn Patrick, the guy we were talking about earlier who died in the plane crash. Uh, he said, as a leader, which he was, never get so far ahead of them they can't see you, and never get so close to them that they can smell you.
Ooh.
And well, that that was the reaction he was looking for.
Yeah.
But it's really true. In fact, true in his case. Don't get too close to your heroes because then you find out they're not all perfect. They're not all heroes. I'll give you an example. This is silly, but it sort of proves the point. We were sharing a suite somewhere one day, William Penpatrick and I, two bedroom, living room in the middle type thing. And I was supposed to wake him up at a certain time because he wanted to take a nap. So I went in, knocked lightly on the door, nothing. Turns out he was in the shower in the bathroom, I think. Uh, so I opened his door to make sure he was up, and there on the edge of the dresser, with car keys and stuff, odds and ends, was a tube of preparation H for
That's for
curing.
eye bags. Now, I know where you're going with this, but those are good for under eye bags. So
That
let's just
also
go with
does that.
that. Yeah,
He didn't
it's
have
not
it.
true, but
He,
still.
he didn't have it 5 bags. But I remember standing there for just a split second, and I was in my late 20s, doing well on stage with him and holding my own and everything. I and either had just become president of the company or was about to become president of the company, and a tube of preparation H rattled me. My hero had hemorrhoids.
Hemorrhoids.
I did,
I'm not going to say what I'm thinking. Keep going.
and later it became worse, as is revealed. First time I've endorsed it or agreed with it in the book that's being written about me by Jason Williford. I was looking through some of the pages at random. I haven't done the whole thing beginning to end yet, but I was flipping through it, and it says, and I'm paraphrasing, and Bill Patrick was a liar, cheat, and thief. I thought, whoa. So I went back and looked through it. Well, he was quoting me because in an off the record it wasn't off the record, but in a background conversation when it got to my holiday magic days, I had told uh, Jason Williford that, and he was quoting me directly and accurately. I got so close that many of the lessons I learned from William Penpatrick were sort of lost to me because I have to consider the source now. And he was a liar, cheat, and thief. I don't know if he was when we first met. I thought he was an inspirational, godlike creature, and whether pressure did it to him. It's the reason people thought he committed suicide when the plane crashed. The feds were closing in on him. He was he went from $42 million to the house was repossessed from Mrs. Patrick almost immediately after he died. The cars were hauled away, and all that was left, a lot of people would pray for this, but all that was left was a suitcase with $386,000 cash in it and a note, if anything happens to WPP, William Penpatrick, give this to Marie. That was his wife. So when he died, we're down to $386,000, not counting all the money he owed. That's the reason this was in cash in the suitcase, so they
Mm,
so they wouldn't get it. Uh, Everything else they got, everything, cars, planes, houses, ranches, everything.
seems
So,
unfair to her, but she
so
was
you,
she was married to him, so I guess it makes sense. But that's sad.
it is, but that's getting too close to your heroes. Uh, or don't put too much stock in your heroes. There are people in this industry, and by this industry I mean sales training, human development, and so on, who will run from a room if I walk into it. We both got hired and they didn't know it or whatever, because I know who's who, what's what, and where the bodies are buried.
Right. You've told me that, and I know some names. I'm not going to say them, but I do know who you're talking about, one in
Yeah,
particular.
it's not true. They never did those things, et cetera. And one of the reasons I don't reveal who they are, except in very I would and have to you, but the reason I don't reveal them out in public is, let's say you have built your life around the teachings of fill in the blank, and you've done well. Uh, you don't need to hear that he or she was a pedophile, or you don't need to hear that he or she's entire life story was made up. It wasn't true. If you're going through sales training with somebody who has trained you, I have a person in mind right now who swears by a particular sales trainer and has done very well in selling, thanks to fill in the blank. He doesn't know that fill in the blank couldn't close a refrigerator door. He could only talk about it from the stage. So don't get close to your hero, too close to your heroes is true, but it may be a little superficial. Maybe what I'm saying is don't put too much stock in your heroes. I had to redo in my mind the things Bill Patrick taught me. The fact he taught it to me doesn't make it untrue. The fact he taught it to me but didn't practice it didn't make it untrue. So be careful who you listen to. As Earl Nightingale used to say, check your references. Use a map, use a compass or whatever, but check your references and don't put too much stock in any one person, because that one person is human and
Yeah. Yeah.
they're entitled to their frailties also.
Frailties is a good way to put it. And, we all have, excuse me, we all have our own biases and we see things, just black and white until we don't.
Right.
And everything changes. So just be prepared for those changes once you think, let me go back a bit and think about this. And then things do change. So be careful. I like what you're saying. We've got just a couple of minutes.
Right.
Anything else you want to say about the astronauts? Because today is the day. I need to go see if they made it out there. If they're where are they?
They're getting suited up. They're
Oh, okay.
supposed to take off at 6:04 p.m. Pacific time, excuse me, Atlantic time. But the history of this shot so far, the crew is heading to the launch pad right now in vehicles. They're being taken out. And so they got a ways to sit, uh, about, 12 to, you got about 4 hours once they get in the cockpit, in the capsule, just to sit there. And I pray, I just really have not a good feeling about this. Not them being killed. I just don't have a good feeling about the success of this shot. It's been put off so many times.
It has, and I was gonna ask you about that and this bothers me, Ben. Normally, and I don't watch the news. I just won't have that garbage in my living room. But I do have a way of keeping up with what's going on. I did not know, because the media is not talking about it apparently, that this was even happening until yesterday. That
Hmm.
upset me a lot. I'm like, how in the world did something this important just skate right past me?
You don't watch the news
I
because
don't
it's
watch the
been,
news.
yeah, it's been on the news, on the news, on the news constantly,
Okay. But it wasn't
almost.
even on Twitter. I
Yeah,
mean, and that's kind of where I go and a few other places. And I went, why am I just finding out about this? This is important.
it is important. And the problem with it is probably part of the reason I have a bad feeling, or not a happy feeling, is that it's been I think a world's record for space shots of any kind. It's been rolled back to the vehicle assembly building, which is no small feat in and of itself, numerous times.
I did read that, and that scared me too.
Yeah, and I thought, God, I hope they sort of got this squared away. but the astronauts have no desire to die, and
No,
and
of
they're
course
they're
not.
pretty sure of themselves. There was a lady who worked at NASA for years, who was better than the computer of those days. This is before AI. Better than the computer. The computer goes zip, 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 and come back in 10 minutes. She'd take 2 weeks on legal pads and say, no, the computer's wrong here, or whatever. And she was always right. John Glenn, I have doubts about this story because they generally don't refuse to do anything. But John Glenn allegedly said before his suborbital flight, I'm not going until a girl checks the figures. And the girl he was talking about was that lady.
Right, right. And I saw something on Twitter this morning because I went to sleep at 2, woke up at 4, and went straight to Twitter. It's like, okay, what's going on? And I'm going to need a nap at some point today, maybe. But somebody, and I think they were being snarky, I'm not sure, but they were addressing Elon Musk. Like, are you prepared to rescue anybody today? We need to know. It's actually a valid question. So,
Very valid and
yeah.
wonderful that technology's arrived, gotten to the point where you can go rescue somebody. In the old days, uh, the old days with me going back to the early 70s, and of course they were firing things off in the 50s. But in the old days, to me, if you got stuck in space, you were stuck in space. Been nice. We'll,
Yeah, yeah.
we'll put your wife on closed circuit and you can say goodbye to her.
Right.
But now they can, in the right circumstances, they can come get you.
Well, that's what I said. Somebody asked if he was on call. I went, okay. I thought that was funny. It's really not, but it kind of is.
Yeah, he's probably right there in the VIP stands.
Oh, I'm sure he is. I'm sure he's watching it right now. Well, listen, everybody, we are out of time and we're going to continue sales infiltration probably for another couple of weeks because it is such a huge topic. So if you want to get the most out of today's episode, grab your copies of the closers parts 1 and part 2 on eBay and follow us along as we break down these strategies. And then I'd like you to do this today. Take a moment to ask yourself, where in my sales conversations can I start positioning smarter, observing better, and infiltrating naturally rather than pushing harder? We just want you to apply one tactic each week, write them down, keep track, and see how it changes the conversations that you're having with your sales team, the people that you're selling to, everybody. So share your results or insights with us on LinkedIn using hashtag sales infiltration, and let's keep learning and going on together with this. Ben, thank you. Hey, do me a
My
favor.
pleasure.
Text me if you, because I'm going to be in my computer all day long. Text me if you see anything about the launch that you think I need to know.
6:04.
You can be my reporter.
Yeah. You have a wonderful day.
You too. Talk to you later next week.
Yep.
Okay, bye.